Thanks for joining us tonight. It's supposed to be the crown jewel of downtown De Pere, but a lawsuit filed by the operators of the Mulva Cultural Center says its exhibits haven't been up to snuff.
The lawsuit says the exhibit company has had a, quote, botched performance that's cost the Mulva hundreds of thousands of dollars. In a First Alert update, Emily Byer takes us through the court documents.
A lawsuit filed July 15th in Brown County Court alleges the Minnesota-based Exhibits Development Group breached its contract with the Mulva Cultural Center. The De Pere Cultural Foundation seeking damages of no less than $1.388.5 million. The lawsuit states the initial lineup of exhibits to be featured included the Beatles, the Grammy Awards, dinosaurs, and Legos. The plaintiff says the exhibitor did not deliver a dinosaur exhibit, saying terror attacks in the Red Sea affected its ability to ship the exhibit. The lawsuit also claiming a featured part of the Beatles exhibit, a Rolls-Royce limousine, was not delivered. In addition, it says an exhibit about Wisconsin Grammy winners was changed without prior notice to focus instead on Latin Grammy winners. The Mulva claims it's paid hundreds of thousands of dollars as part of a deal with EDG that began on January 1st of 2023. The museum terminated that contract this past April, citing multiple failures to follow through on obligations. We've contacted both parties of the lawsuit. President Marvin Wall for the Mulva Cultural Center responded to our request, telling us, quote, the Mulva Cultural Center does not comment on pending litigation, end quote. We have not yet heard back from the exhibitor. The lawsuit says it must submit a written answer within 20 days of the summons. That deadline would be August 4th. In De Pere, Emily Byer, Action 2 News.